I want you to try something with me. It's going to sound incredibly simple, maybe even a little trivial, but if you really, really dig into the physics of it, it's basically impossible.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Just reach out and touch the object that's nearest to you. It could be your desk, the arm of your chair, maybe a coffee cup.
All right.
Now, describe that experience. You'd probably say you're feeling, smoothness, or maybe cold, or resistance, right?
The grain of the wood on my desk.
Exactly. You feel like your hand is merging with the reality of that object. You feel like you are directly experiencing the world.
Which is the fundamental deception of the human experience. Because physiologically, strictly speaking, that is not what's happening at all.
It feels so immediate, though. It feels direct. It feels undeniably real.
It's an incredibly convincing illusion. But you are not touching the desk. You're not feeling heat. You're not feeling pain. Your brain, which right now is sitting in a dark, silent, windowless vault of bone called your skull, has never touched anything. It has never seen a single photon of light. It has never felt a temperature. It's completely and utterly isolated from the universe.
This is the matrix problem. The only thing the brain actually receives, the only thing it has ever received, is a stream of electrical ticks.
That's it. Action potentials.
Yeah.
A binary code, just ones and zeros. And this is really where we have to start our deep dive today. We are looking at somatosensory neurotransmission.
Which is just a very fancy way of asking, how does the brain hallucinate a full-color, tactile reality based on nothing but a sequence of electrical spikes?
That is a slightly terrifying way to frame it, but yeah, that's it perfectly. It sets the stage.
Yeah.
We're decoding our sense of touch, of pain, and of temperature.
And to do this properly, we are pulling from the absolute heavyweights of medical literature. We've got Ganong's review of medical physiology, and of course the legendary Guyton Hall textbook of medical physiology.
And we absolutely need both of them for this topic. They complement each other so well. The way I like to think about it is that we're going to use Ganong for the wet work, the real nuts and bolts.
The molecular stuff.
The molecular stuff, exactly.
Yeah.
The specific receptors, the TRP channels, that chemical soup of inflammation we'll get into.
Getting Guyton.
Lean on Guyton for the wiring diagram, the big picture, the systems level pathways, the logic of how these signals travel up the spinal cord at different speeds, and how the brain organizes and regulates it all.
So our mission today is to decode that signal. We want to understand how a physical, mechanical force like, say, a slap on the back, gets turned into a language the brain can actually understand. And along the way, we're going to uncover a central tension that I found really fascinating in the reading. It seems like the body is constantly making a trade-off.
It is. It's always a trade-off. In the touch system, it's a trade-off between speed and detail.
Okay.
And then in the pain system, it's a different trade-off. It's between urgency and modulation.
And the big takeaway, the punchline that we're kind of driving toward for this whole discussion,
That your nervous system does not care about accuracy. It cares about usefulness. It is not trying to be a perfect physics instrument that's precisely measuring the world. It is trying to keep you alive.
usefulness over accuracy. I love that. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the translators, the things that actually turn the world into electricity.
Right. And this is the core concept of transduction. It's the fundamental job of any sensory system, whether it's sight, hearing, or touch.
So taking one form of energy and turning it into another.
Exactly. You have energy out there in the world, mechanical energy from pressure, thermal energy from heat, chemical energy from, say, a bee sting. The brain can't read any of that. It doesn't speak thermal. It doesn't speak mechanical.
It only speaks one language.
Electricity.
Yeah.
Action potentials. So the receptor is the translator. It takes the foreign language of the physical world and translates it into the native tongue of the nervous system.
So how does it do that? What's the mechanism?
It does it through something called a receptor potential. And this is a really crucial distinction that Ganong makes, and it's one that often trips students up.
Okay.
The receptor potential is analog. It's graded. If you press just a little bit on a touch receptor, you get a small change in voltage at the nerve ending. Press harder, you get a bigger change. It's like a dimmer switch.
But nerves don't work like dimmer switches, do they? They're all or nothing. I remember that from basic biology. You can't have a half action potential.
Correct. The nerve signal, the action potential that travels down the axon, is digital. It's on or it's off, a 1 or a 0. So the receptor has to perform this amazing conversion. It has to convert that analog dimmer switch voltage into a digital frequency.
Ah, so it's not the size of the spark, it's the number of sparks per second.
You got it. The stronger the initial stimulus, the higher the frequency of the action potentials. A light touch might be, beep, beep, beep.
Yeah.
A hard press would be beep, 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 beep. So the brain isn't measuring the size of the electricity, it's measuring the tempo. Precisely. It counts the spikes per second to gauge intensity.
Okay, so that's the how. But what about the what? This is the part that always gets me. If everything is just electrical boops, and a beep coming from my eye looks exactly the same on an oscilloscope as a beep coming from my finger, how does my brain know that one means light and the other means touch?
That is what Guyton calls the labeled line principle. And it is absolutely fundamental to understanding how we experience reality. The brain knows what it is experiencing based entirely on which wire is carrying the signal.
The labeled line, it's like every nerve has a name tag on it.
It's the perfect analogy. Think of it like an old-school telephone switchboard. If a signal comes in on wire A, the operator, the brain, is hardwired to interpret that signal as pain in the left thumb. It doesn't matter how you trigger wire A.
Wait, what do you mean it doesn't matter?
You could trigger with a hammer, you could trigger it with heat, or, and this is the key part, you could trigger it by stimulating the nerve directly with an electrode.
So if I were a neurosurgeon and I could find the exact nerve fiber for burning pain in the thumb and I hooked it up to a tiny AA battery, my brain would feel burning pain, even if my thumb was currently in a bucket of ice water.
Yes, 100%. The brain interprets the source based on the line, not the stimulus. This is actually why if you get hit in the eye, you see stars.
I've always wondered about that. It's a mechanical punch, not a flashlight.
Right. A physical punch is mechanical pressure. It has absolutely nothing to do with photons. But that pressure is enough to stimulate the retina, to physically deform the cells.
And the visual labeled lines fire.
The visual labeled lines fire. And the brain, sitting in its dark vault, says, well, the signal is coming from the eye wire, and the eye wire carries light. So let there be light. It sees stars.
That is just wild. It really reinforces that matrix idea. We are just interpreting signals based on where they come from. It's almost startling how easily the system can be tricked if you just access the wiring directly.
It's a completely closed loop. We are, in a very real sense, at the mercy of the cables.
All right, now let's look at the hardware itself. Let's talk about the mechanoreceptor squad. We have these very specific receptors in our skin that handle touch. And the sources break them down into 4 main types. But I don't want to just list them. I want to look at the engineering because Guyton really emphasizes that these things are built differently for a reason.
Right. And to understand them, we need to look at them through the lens of adaptation. This is a huge recurring theme in physiology.
Yeah.
Some receptors are phasic, they adapt rapidly, and others are tonic, they adapt slowly.
Phasic versus tonic. Change detectors versus state detectors.
A great way to put it.
But let's start with the phasic ones, the rapid adapters. The star of the show here seems to be the Pacinian corpuscle.
The Pacinian corpuscle is a true engineering marvel. It's the largest of the mechanoreceptors. If you look at it under a microscope, it looks like a tiny onion buried deep in the skin.
An onion?
Yeah, it has these concentric layers, these lamellae of connective tissue wrapped around a central nerve fiber, and there's fluid in between all the layers. And its entire structure is what we call viscoelastic.
Viscoelastic, meaning it's kind of squishy.
It means it absorbs and redistributes pressure over time. This structure acts as a high-pass filter, if you want to use some audio engineering terms. It lets high-frequency signals through, but blocks low-frequency sustained signals.
Okay, so walk me through it. I press down on my skin. What happens in that little onion?
When you first press down, that mechanical force deforms the outer layers of the onion. That pressure is transmitted instantly through the fluid to the center core, which physically deforms the nerve ending and pops open sodium channels. Zap, you get a signal, an action potential.
But, and this is the key part from Ganong, that signal dies almost instantly. We're talking within a few milliseconds, even if I'm still pressing down with the same force.
Exactly. Because the fluid moves. The outer layers are still deformed by your finger, but the fluid inside redistributes itself to relieve the pressure on that central core. The nerve fiber slips back into its resting shape, the sodium channels close, and the signal stops.
So the receptor mechanically hides the fact that there is still constant pressure being applied.
Mechanically, yes. But there's a second layer to this adaptation that Ganong points out, which is really cool. It's not just the onion shape. The nerve fiber itself accommodates.
What does that mean?
It means even if you could magically peel away all the onion layers and inject current directly into the nerve ending, the nerve would still eventually stop firing. The sodium channels themselves become inactivated after a brief period. It has both a mechanical and an electrical off switch.
So why? Why build it this way? Why build a sensor that deliberately ignores a constant stimulus?
Bandwidth. Your brain has a finite amount of processing power, a limited amount of attention. If you were constantly, consciously aware of the pressure of your socks, the weight of your shirt, the band of your watch, and the pressure of your glutes on the chair you're sitting in right now,
I would be completely overwhelmed. I couldn't focus on anything.
you'd be useless. The system prioritizes change, because change is where the danger or the opportunity usually lies. A new touch could be a mosquito, or a predator, or a potential mate. A constant touch is just furniture.
So the Pacinian corpuscle is first and foremost a change detector.
It is the ultimate change detector. It's built to ignore the steady state. And that structure makes it an expert at one thing in particular: vibration.
Because vibration is just rapid change.
It's just rapid change, pressure on, pressure off, pressure on, pressure off, hundreds of times a second. The Pacinian corpuscle is exquisitely tuned to detect these high-frequency vibrations, up to 800 cycles per second. It is what allows you to feel the texture of a piece of fabric.
I never thought of texture as vibration.
It is. As you run your finger over it, the tiny bumps of the weave create microscopic high-frequency vibrations that the Pacinian corpuscles pick up. It's also how you can tell if your phone is buzzing in your pocket.
Or feel an earthquake.
Or feel an earthquake, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's totally useless for telling you that you're still holding your coffee cup, because after that initial grab, it would go silent.
Right. For the coffee cup, we need the other kind of receptor, the tonic ones, the slow adapters.
Now you're talking about the Merkel discs and the Ruffini endings. Merkel discs are your main pressure sensors. They are found in little clusters, and they keep firing as long as the skin is indented. They are the ones telling your brain, yes, the object is still in your hand, don't drop it.
They give you a sense of sustained pressure and shape.
Right. And the Ruffini endings, they detect stretch. They are buried deeper in the skin and in joint capsules. They are crucial for proprioception, knowing the shape of your hand and the position of your joints without looking.
So if I close my eyes and make a fist, I know my hand is closed because the Ruffini endings in my skin and joints are screaming, stretched.
Precisely. They give you your sense of body position.
And then there's one more, the Meissner corpuscles. Where do they fit in?
The Meissner corpuscles are kind of like the little siblings of the Pacinian corpuscles. They are also rapidly adapting phasic, but they're located right near the surface of the skin, especially in the fingertips and lips.
So they're more sensitive.
They're more sensitive to light touch and what we call flutter, low-frequency vibration. They are what allow you to feel if a coin is slipping through your fingers, or to read Braille. They're for fine, detailed, moving touch.
Okay, so this totally explains a clinical thought experiment I've always wondered about. When I put my shirt on in the morning, I feel it. I feel the fabric on my shoulders, on my back. But 10 seconds later, nothing. It's gone. I don't feel my clothes for the rest of the day.
That is receptor adaptation in action, a perfect example. The phasic receptors, the Pacinians and Meissners, fire when the shirt first makes contact. They shout, change detected, new stimulus.
But then it just stays there.
And once the shirt settles, the stimulus becomes constant. The phasic receptors go silent because the fluid redistributes and the channels inactivate. The tonic receptors, the Merkels, might still be firing a little bit, but the brain has its own central filters that actively tune that out as well. It learns to ignore it.
Usefulness over accuracy. It is not accurate to say I am not wearing a shirt, but it is highly useful for my brain to ignore that constant non-threatening signal so I can focus on other things.
You've got it. That's the design principle right there.
Okay, so the signal has been transduced. We've turned pressure into a series of electrical beeps. Now those beeps have to get to the brain. And this brings us to section 2, the superhighway, the dorsal column medial lemniscal system.
This is the aristocracy of sensory pathways. This is the express lane. This system is designed to handle fine touch, vibration, and proprioception, all the high-fidelity information. And it is built for one thing above all else: speed.
Guyton really emphasizes the speed here. We're not talking about slow, leisurely signals. We're talking about a beta fibers.
Yes. These are the Ferraris of the nervous system. They're large diameter fibers, and they are heavily myelinated. That myelin sheath acts like insulation on a wire, allowing the signal to jump from node to node in a process called saltatory conduction.
So they're fast. How fast are we talking?
We're talking conduction velocities of 30 to 70 meters per second. For a tall person, a signal from your toe can reach your brain in a fraction of a second.
It's basically a dedicated fiber optic cable for high-definition data.
That's a perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
When you're trying to coordinate a complex movement like playing the piano, or when you're trying to read Braille, you need that signal to arrive now, You cannot wait for a laggy dial-up connection.
And the pathway itself is interesting anatomically. It enters the spinal cord from the skin and then just goes straight up.
That is a critical detail, especially for diagnosing injuries. The A-beta fibers enter the spinal cord via the dorsal root and immediately turn upwards, ascending ipsilaterally.
Ipsilaterally, meaning they stay on the same side of the spinal cord.
The very same side. If you touch something with your right hand, that signal travels up the right side of your spinal cord in a bundle of nerves called the dorsal columns, all the way up to the brainstem, specifically the medulla.
And that's where things get twisted, literally.
Right. It's only in the medulla that these fibers finally synapse. It's specific nuclei called the gracial and cuneate nuclei. And then the second-order neurons, the next nerve in the chain decussate.
They cross over to the other side of the brainstem?
They cross over. So from the medulla up through a pathway called the medial lemniscus to the thalamus, and then finally to the cortex. The signal is on the opposite side of the body from where it started.
So touch from the right hand is processed by the left brain, but this staying on the same side business in the spinal cord is really, really important for clinical diagnosis, isn't it?
It is huge. And we will see exactly why when we get to the Brown-Séquard syndrome later on. But for now, just pin that fact in your mind. Touch stays on the same side in the spine. Pain, as we'll see, does not.
Now, before that signal even hits the cortex, there is some really important processing that happens. Genong talks about something called lateral inhibition. When I first read the definition, it sounded a bit dry, but then I realized this is basically Photoshop for the brain.
That is a perfect metaphor. It is an edge enhancement algorithm built right into the wiring. It sharpens the contrast of a signal.
Walk us through the mechanism. How does the body sharpen a signal? How does it take a blurry input and make it crisp?
Okay, imagine you poke your skin with the tip of a pin. The skin is flexible, right? So you aren't just pressing on one single tiny mathematical point. You're actually deforming a little hill of skin.
Right, the center is pushed down the most and the sides are pushed down a little bit.
Exactly. That means the central receptor, the one right under the pen tip, is firing like crazy, but the receptors next to it on the slopes of that little hill are also firing, just a little bit.
So the raw signal coming up the spinal cord should be fuzzy. It should be a peak with blurry edges, like a smudge.
It should be. And if that blurry smudge reached the brain, our sense of touch would be incredibly low resolution. We'd have a hard time telling where one thing ended and another began. But the brain needs precision. It wants to know exactly where that point is.
So it uses lateral inhibition.
It uses lateral inhibition. The primary neuron, the one in the center that's shouting the loudest, sends out little side branches to its neighbors as it travels up the pathway.
And what do those branches do? They're not excitatory.
No, they're the opposite. They connect to and activate tiny inhibitory interneurons. And these interneurons release GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter, onto the neighboring pathways. They effectively tell the neighbors to shut up.
So the main signal actively suppresses the noise around it.
It says, I am the important signal here. You guys are just fringe noise. Quiet down. By suppressing those fringe signals, it sharpens the contrast. It computationally turns a blurry hill into a sharp, well-defined spike.
So it's not about making the central signal stronger. It's about making the background quieter.
Exactly. In sensory neuroscience, contrast is often far more important than absolute intensity.
And we can actually test this on ourselves, right? This is the basis of the two-point discrimination test that doctors do.
Yes, and the differences across the body are absolutely staggering. If you take a caliper or even just a bent paper clip and touch 2 points on your fingertip, you could distinguish them as 2 separate points, even if they're only about 2 millimeters apart.
That's incredible fidelity.
It's incredible. That's because you have extremely high receptor density and a massive amount of lateral inhibition to sharpen those signals.
Yeah.
Now try that on your back.
I'm guessing it's not 2 millimeters.
On your back, the points have to be maybe 60 or 70 millimeters apart, almost 3 inches, before you can reliably tell it's 2 points and not just one. Your back is low resolution. It's like an 8-bit image from an old video game compared to the 4K Ultra HD image of your fingertips.
Which leads us perfectly into section 3, the map, the somatosensory cortex itself.
The famous homunculus.
The little man. If you look at the map of the body that's laid out on the brain, specifically on the post-central gyrus, it doesn't look like a human at all. It looks like a carnival mirror reflection.
It looks like a monster, honestly. It has these enormous hands, giant thumb, huge lips, and a massive tongue. But then this tiny little torso and spindly little legs.
And Guyton makes the point very clearly that this distortion is based on importance, not physical size.
It's based entirely on the density of sensory input. It's an economic budget. The brain has a finite amount of processing power, what we call cortical real estate. It has to allocate that space wisely.
And we use our hands and mouth for everything.
You use your hands to manipulate the world, to feel textures, to build things. You use your mouth and lips to speak, to eat, to kiss. You don't use your back for fine discrimination. So the brain allocates massive amounts of neurons, huge swaths of cortical territory, to the hands and lips.
So the size of the body part in the brain's map corresponds directly to the resolution of the sense, not the physical size of the limb.
100% correct. More brain space equals more processing power equals higher resolution.
But this map isn't fixed, is it? This is where Gannon gets into the concept of plasticity, and I found this part hopeful, but also a little bit spooky.
It's one of the most amazing discoveries in modern neuroscience.
Yeah.
We used to think the brain map was hardwired at birth. If you lost a finger, that part of the brain just went dormant and died. We now know that's completely wrong.
The brain can rewire itself.
It's incredibly dynamic. Let's take a clinical scenario. If you lose a digit, say your ring finger is amputated, the cortical area that used to process signals from that finger doesn't buy. It just gets lonely. It stops receiving any input.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. So the neighboring cortical areas, the neurons that process the middle finger and the pinky, start to invade. They send out sprouting connections into that silent territory. They take over the land.
It's a cortical land grab, a hostile takeover.
It is. And this process, this remapping, is the leading explanation for the phantom limb phenomenon.
Where people feel sensations in a limb that isn't there anymore.
Right. And here's where it gets really specific. The map for the face is located right next to the map for the hand on the cortex. So if someone loses a hand, it's very common for the face map to invade the now silent hand territory.
Okay, so what happens?
So if you touch that person's cheek, the signal travels up to the face area of the brain. But that area has now grown wires into the old hand area. So when you stimulate the cheek, you might also trigger the hand neurons. And that person will feel a sensation in their missing hand.
That is absolutely mind-blowing. The wiring gets physically crossed because the map is actively rewriting itself?
It really drives home the point we started with. You don't feel your hand. You feel the activity in the hand area of your brain. If the face wire starts stimulating the hand area, you feel a hand. Reality is a construct of the cortex.
There's another condition mentioned in the sources that I found just as fascinating, asteriognosis. It sounds like a spell from Harry Potter, but it's a specific neurological deficit.
Yes. This is what happens when you damage the somatosensory association area. Not the primary map, the homunculus itself, but the area just behind it that interprets what the map is saying.
So the raw data is coming in just fine.
The raw data is perfect. Let's say I hand you a key. You close your eyes and you have the stereognosis. You'd be able to describe it. You would feel cold metal. You would feel sharp bridges. You'd feel the weight. You would feel all the distinct points. But you wouldn't be able to say it's a key.
You have all the pixels, but you can't see the picture.
That's the perfect way to describe it. You cannot synthesize the raw sensory attributes into a coherent object identity. It shows us that feeling something and knowing what you are feeling are two completely different physiological processes happening in different parts of the brain.
Okay, let's pivot. That was a deep dive into touch, the speed and detail system. Now we need to talk about the other side of the coin, the alarm system, pain. Or, more technically, nociception.
And that distinction is really important. Ganong is very clear on this. Nociception is the hardware detection of a noxious or potentially damaging stimulus. It's the nerve firing in response to tissue damage.
So it's the raw data.
It's the raw data. Pain is the unpleasant emotional and subjective experience that the brain creates from that signal. You can have nociception without pain, like under general anesthesia, and you can tragically have pain without any nociception, like in certain central neuropathic pain syndromes.
And the receptors here are different too. There are no fancy onions or fluid-filled discs.
No. Nociceptors are just free nerve endings. They are raw, exposed wires that branch out through the tissue like the roots of a tree. And crucially, unlike the Pacinian corpuscle, they do not adapt. Or if anything, they become more sensitive over time.
Which makes perfect sense. You do not want to get used to your hand resting on a hot stove.
Exactly. If pain receptors adapted like touch receptors, you would burn your hand off and not notice. They are designed to keep firing, and in many cases, to fire harder, as long as the threat is present.
Okay, now let's talk about the soup. I love this term from the reading. When tissue gets injured, it's not just a mechanical break, it's a chemical explosion.
It really is.
Yeah.
Cells rupture, they spill their guts out into the surrounding space. You get potassium ions, K plus A or A, leaking out, which directly depolarizes nerve endings. You get the release of inflammatory molecules like bradykin, histamine, and substance P from various cells.
And the big one, prostaglandins.
And you get the local synthesis of prostaglandins. This whole cocktail, this chemical soup.
That's what?
It sensitizes the nerve endings. It lowers their threshold for firing.
This is what we call primary hyperalgesia.
Precisely. Think about a bad sunburn. Normally, a warm shower feels nice. But if you have a sunburn, that same warm water feels like liquid fire. Why, the temperature of the water hasn't changed, but the chemical soup in your sun-damaged skin has made the thermal receptors there hypersensitive. Their threshold has dropped.
And this is a pharmacology moment too, isn't it? Because this is where drugs like aspirin and ibuprofen live.
This is exactly where they live. NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, work by blocking an enzyme called cyclooxygenase, or COX. Your body needs the COX enzyme to convert arachidonic acid into prostaglandins. If you block the enzyme, you start making prostaglandins.
So you're not fixing the injury, but you are turning down the volume of the chemical soup.
Exactly. The cells are still damaged, the bradykinin is still there, but you are preventing that intense sensitization of the nerves. You are raising their firing threshold back up towards normal levels.
Let's get even more molecular and talk about the TRP channels. This is where the physics of temperature meets the chemistry of pain. I feel like this is where we really get to see the robot code of the body.
The transient receptor potential channels, these are just incredible. They're ion channels on the nerve endings that are designed to pop open in response to specific physical stimuli. And they're how we finally figured out why chili peppers feel hot.
It's a TRPV1 channel, right?
Yes, TRPV1. This channel is a protein that is physically designed to change its shape and open when the temperature goes above about 43 degrees Celsius, which is the threshold for painful heat. When it opens, ions rush in, the nerve fires, and the brain's labeled line says, hot.
But by a complete quirk of evolution.
By a total quirk of evolution, the molecule capsaicin, the active ingredient in hot peppers, happens to have the perfect shape to lock onto this exact same channel and force it open, even at room temperature. It chemically hacks the lock.
So the brain literally cannot tell the difference between eating a jalapeno and putting a burning match on your tongue.
To the nerve, there is no difference. The same door opened, the same ions rushed in, the same labeled line fired. The brain gets the signal on the painful heat wire and says, fire. It is a perfect chemical illusion.
And the reverse is true for mint. That's why it feels cool.
The exact reverse. There's another channel, TRPM8, that responds to cold temperatures. But it also happens to respond to the chemical menthol. That's why mint gum makes your mouth feel physically cold, and why drinking a glass of cold water after chewing mint gum feels absolutely freezing. You've chemically hacked the cold sensor.
I love that. Hacking the sensor. It's so accurate. Now, we talked about the single fast superhighway for touch, but pain is different. It has its own pathways, and there are two of them.
Guyton breaks this down beautifully into what he calls fast pain and slow pain, or the neospinothalamic tract and the paleospinothalamic tract.
Fast and slow. This completely explains the double pain phenomenon.
It does. Think about stubbing your toe. Just walk us through the sensation second by second.
Okay. I kick the table leg. First, there's that instant, sharp electric shock of a pain, OUCH. It's immediate and it's very easy to locate. I know exactly where it is.
That's the fast pain. That signal is carried by A delta fibers. They're lightly myelinated, so they're pretty fast. Not as fast as the touch fibers, but fast enough. They use glutamate as their neurotransmitter. They shoot right up to the cortex to tell you where and when to pull away. It's a discriminative signal. Left big toe, danger, move.
But then, a second or two later, something else arrives.
Then comes the ache, the deep, burning, throbbing sensation, the I just want to curl up and die feeling. That is slow pain.
And that's carried on the C fibers.
The C fibers, these are tiny, unmyelinated nerves. They're incredibly... Slow conduction is only about 0.5 to 2 meters per second. That's basically walking speed.
Yeah.
That's why there is a noticeable delay.
And they transmit differently?
They use a different transmitter, substance P, and here's the key. They don't just go to the where is it part of the brain. They have massive connections to the brainstem, the reticular formation, which wakes you up and keeps you awake, and the limbic system, which controls emotion.
So slow pain isn't just information, it's punishment.
It is suffering. It's the effective emotional component of pain. It is designed to be intolerable. It forces you to change your behavior, to rest, to protect the injury. Fast pain says, get away from the knife. Slow pain says, Lie down and let the wound heal for the next 3 days.
That makes total sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah.
Fast pain prevents further damage, slow pain promotes healing. But it really, really sucks when you're the one lying there.
It does.
Which brings us to section 5, modulation. Because pain isn't just a one-way street, right? It's not just a notification on your phone that you can't swipe away, or maybe you can.
You can. Pain is a narrative, not just a fact. And the body has remarkable ways to edit that narrative. The most famous and intuitive mechanism is the gait control theory.
This is the rub it better phenomenon. You bump your shin on the coffee table and you instinctively reach down and rub it. Why does that actually help? It sounds like an old wives' tale.
It's solid neurophysiology. Melzack and Wall came up with this in the 60s. It's essentially a traffic jam in the spinal cord. You have the slow, unmyelinated C fibers carrying the pain signal up towards the brain.
Right. The slow pain pathway.
But when you rub your skin, you activate those big, fast, myelinated A-beta touch fibers, the fiber optic cables from section 2.
So you have a slow signal and a fast signal racing to the same spot in the spinal cord.
Exactly. And those fast A-beta fibers do something incredibly clever. They activate a special inhibitory interneuron in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, a gatekeeper cell. This interneuron releases inhibitory neurotransmitters that dampen the signal coming from the C fiber. Essentially, the touch signal slams the gate shut on the pain signal.
So the brain up top gets a lot of touch signal and a lot less pain signal. The volume on the pain is turned down.
Precisely. This is exactly how a 10S unit works. Transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation. Those little buzzing pads you put on your skin, they're just flooding the gate with non-painful touch signals to drown out the chronic pain signals.
But the body has an even stronger, more powerful painkiller than just rubbing. The endogenous opioids, the body's own morphine.
This is one of the most sophisticated and powerful systems we have. It's a top-down control system. The brain has a descending pathway. It starts in a midbrain region called the periaqueductal gray, travels down to the raphe magnus in the brainstem, and then sends projections all the way down to the spinal cord.
So it's the brain telling the spine, listen, I know you're getting pain signals, but I need you to ignore them right now.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
When this system is activated by extreme stress, for example, or by placebo or by acupuncture, it releases serotonin and norepinephrine in the spinal cord. These, in turn, trigger local neurons to release enkephalins and dynorphins.
Which are the endogenous opioids.
They are the body's natural painkillers, and they act like a molecular mute button. They bind to opioid receptors on the pain fibers and do two things simultaneously. Presynaptically, they block calcium channels on the incoming nerve, so it can't even release its pain transmitter. And postsynaptically, they open the potassium channels on the receiving nerve, hyperpolarizing it, so it's much harder for it to fire an action potential.
It's a double lock. It stops the signal from being sent and stops it from being heard.
It silences the synapse at the source. It is incredibly effective.
And this explains stress-induced analgesia, the classic story of soldiers in battle who get shot but don't feel any pain until they are safe in the medic tent hours later.
Yes. The brain decides that survival in that moment fighting, is more important than feeling the injury. It suppresses the pain narrative so you can keep functioning. Again, usefulness over accuracy. It is accurate to feel the bullet wound. It is more useful to run away.
Before we leave this pain section, we have to talk about referred pain. This is such a classic clinical concept. Why does a heart attack feel like pain in the left arm? The heart isn't in the arm.
This is the theory of convergence. The spinal cord, especially at certain levels, is very crowded real estate. The sensory fibers coming from the viscera, from the heart in this case, and the sensory fibers coming from the skin of the left arm happen to converge in synapse on the same second-order neuron in the spinal cord.
They share a wire, they plug into the same jack.
They share the uplink to the brain. And because the brain rarely gets pain signals from the heart, hopefully, but it gets signals from the arm all the time, bumps, scrapes, cuts, when that shared wire fires, the brain has to guess the source.
It makes a probabilistic error.
It makes a best guess based on past experience. It says, well, statistically, a signal on this line is almost always from the arm. So it interprets the heart attack as arm pain. That's referred pain.
Fascinating. Now, I want to bring all of this together with a case study. Section 6, spinal cord lesions. Specifically, the classic Brown-Sequard syndrome. This is the ultimate test of whether you've understood the pathways we've discussed.
It is. This is a favorite on medical board exams because it requires you to visualize the crossing points of these different wires in three-dimensional space.
So let's set the scene. A patient is rushed into the ER. They've been stabbed in the back. The blade entered the right side of the spine, let's say at the level of the belly button, T10, and it cleanly severed the right half of the spinal cord. The left half is perfectly intact.
Okay, so we call this a hemisection of the cord. One side of the highway is completely closed, the other is wide open.
Now, the neurologist walks in to test the patient's legs. What do they find? Logic would suggest that since the right side of the cord is cut, the right leg should be numb and the left leg should be perfectly fine.
That would be the intuitive common sense logic.
Yeah.
But physiologically, it is completely wrong. And the reason it's wrong reveals the genius and the beautiful messiness of our wiring.
Okay, let's trace the touch signal first. The dorsal column pathway. The patient closes their eyes. The doctor takes a cotton swab and lightly touches the patient's right leg below the injury. Does he feel it?
No. He feels absolutely nothing. Remember, the dorsal column system, the fast touch highway, is ipsilateral. It enters the spine and stays on the same side all the way up to the neck. So the signal from the right leg enters the right side of the cord, travels up, and hits the knife wound. It's a dead end.
Okay, so touch, vibration, proprioception, all gone on the right leg. What about the left leg?
The leg touch is perfectly fine. Those signals enter the left side of the cord and travel up the intact left highway without any problem.
Okay, so far so good. Now, the doctor takes a safety pin and tests for pain and temperature. He pricks the right leg, the same one that couldn't feel the cotton swab. What happens?
The patient screams, or at least says, ouch. He feels the pain perfectly.
Wait a second. The cord is cut on the right side. How is the pain signal from the right leg getting through that cut?
Because the pain system, the anterolateral or spinothalamic tract, is wired differently. Remember, pain is urgent. It doesn't wait to cross. Pain fibers enter the spinal cord and cross over to the opposite side almost immediately, within 1 or 2 spinal segments.
So the pain signal from the right leg enters the right side of the cord, crosses over to the left side, and then travels safely up the intact left highway.
Exactly. It bypasses the injury completely. But now, for the final twist, look at the left leg, the so-called good leg that could feel touch.
The doctor pricks the left leg with the pin.
Nothing. No pain, no temperature sensation. Because the pain signal from the left leg entered the left side, crossed over to the right side, and ran right into the knife cut.
That is absolutely mind-bending. So below the injury, you have one leg that can feel a feather but not a flame, and the other leg can feel the flame but not the feather.
It's called dissociative anesthesia, a complete separation of sensory modalities. And it's the smoking gun that tells the neurologist exactly which side of the cord was cut without even looking at an MRI scan.
That is just such a satisfying logical puzzle. It completely relies on knowing where the wires cross.
It's beautiful functional anatomy.
All right, one last quick section. Section 7, temperature. We touched on this with the TRP channels, but there is a perception aspect here from Guyton that is really interesting. We are terrible thermometers, aren't we?
We are awful at judging absolute temperature. If I asked you to touch a wall and tell me if it's 22 degrees Celsius or 24 degrees Celsius, you would just be guessing. But we are excellent, exquisite detectors of change.
The classic experiment. The 3 buckets of water.
That's the one. You put your left hand in a bucket of hot water and your right hand in a bucket of cold water. You let them adapt for a minute. Then you put both hands simultaneously into a third bucket of lukewarm water.
And
The left hand, which was coming from hot, screams, "This is freezing cold." The right hand, which was coming from cold, screams, "This is burning hot."
even though they are in the exact same water.
But the change is in the opposite direction for each hand. And again, this is because the receptors have adapted to the baseline they were in. They only report the deviation from that baseline.
And then there's paradoxical cold. This sounds like a sci-fi weapon or something.
It's a glitch in the matrix. It's a very strange phenomenon where sometimes extreme heat like over 45 degrees Celsius can, for a split second, stimulate cold fibers. We think it's because the intense heat overwhelms or damages the receptor and it misfires.
So for a split second, touching something that's searing hot can feel freezing cold.
It can, because the wires got crossed. The labeled line for cold fired, so the brain felt cold, even though the physical stimulus was intense heat.
Wow. Okay, so bringing it all home, we started this whole conversation with the illusion of direct experience. We've walked through the translators, the pathways, the cortical map, and all modulation systems. And the theme that just keeps coming up over and over again is this idea that the system is curated.
It is a curated feed. Your somatosensory system is not a documentary filmmaker trying to capture objective reality. It is a brilliant video editor. It cuts out the boring scenes through adaptation. It enhances the contrast with lateral inhibition. It adds dramatic special effects like referred pain. And sometimes it censors the content entirely with stress-induced analgesia.
And it does all of this not to lie to us, but to help us function, to help us survive.
Exactly. Accuracy is a luxury that evolution often can't afford. Survival is a necessity. The system is designed to prioritize the signal that matters right now.
Which leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought for our listeners to mull over. We've talked at length about how pain can be modulated. It can be turned up by inflammation, turned down by rubbing or by endogenous opioids. So if pain is a construct, if it's influenced by our mood, our stress, our past experiences, and these complex gates in our spine, how much of the pain we feel is real tissue damage, and how much is a protective narrative that our brain is simply refusing to edit?
That is the million-dollar question in chronic pain management, isn't it? The challenge is that sometimes the tissue heals completely, but the pain narrative gets stuck on a loop. The alarm keeps ringing long after the fire is out.
If you want to dive deeper into the map of your own body, I highly recommend you check out Guyton's chapter on the somatosensory cortex. I think it's chapter 48 in recent editions, to see that crazy homunculus for yourself. And look at Ganom, maybe chapter 8, for the incredible molecular details of that chemical soup of pain. It's truly fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. The more you understand the wiring, the more you appreciate the experience.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.